Yeah, I'm Alexi from the University of Oxford and the Institute for Digital Archaeology, and I'm here today with the Marconi van, which is a mobile exhibition about the life and work of Marconi.
This is not a van, it's a dear little Morris Traveller, or?
Yeah, it's a Morris Minor Traveller, so yes, I'm describing it as a van. I suppose it is correctly a very early estate car, but we chose it. It has a nice history, a nice link to Oxford, but it also has this wonderful feature of these glass windows at the back, which are tailor-made for a mobile exhibition.
This is in fact a half-timbered car, isn't it?
It is a half-timbered car, that's right. It was built in 1968 in the Cowley Motor Works in Oxford.
And how did a half-timbered car, who had the Marconi genius idea of converting this into a Marconi travelling show?
So we wanted to do an exhibition about Marconi and his life and legacy, and in particular we wanted to do something that might be accessible to people during lockdown, when actually going inside museums and experiencing hand-on exhibits was more difficult. So the idea was to produce an exhibition that you can see in the open air, which is nice and safe, and that is also a little bit fun. So what's nice about this is we get to talk about Marconi to people who are already interested in radio, to people who are curious about what might be in the back of the van, and also of course to people who come over because they're really interested in the car.
And why are you here, bravely having driven here alone?
All the way to Chelmsford, right across the country.
Yeah.
Well, it's a real pleasure to be
Well,
here.
it could break down.
It could. I would say it's an extremely reliable little car. It runs really well. I would go anywhere in the Marconi van. He's looked after me very nicely over this last few years.
What's his name, Morris?
Well, he gets called Marconi van, capital M, capital V.
Okay.
No, the reliability is not really an issue, and it's a huge pleasure to be able to represent the work of Marconi, the excitement of radio, and all the things it's already has led to and may lead to in the future.
Totally English eccentricity at its best.
Yes, yeah, sort of, yeah.
And even in your name, you're not English.
No, well, I'm sort of, so my mother's family are English, my father's family are not English at all, that's right. So at some level, like Marconi, I have I was born in this country, although Marconi was not, of course, born in this country, but he, was someone who spent a long time in the UK, was almost a sort of, became a really important figure as well here as well as in his own.
And he'd had two different parents from two different nationalities.
Yes, his mother was Irish and his father was Italian.
Well, I feel very much at home because my mother's Greek and my father's Inglesaki, as we call it. So that's lovely. Well, what can we say about the front of it? Can you take me through that? Is that Saint Marconi badge here?
So we've got these two badges. Yeah, so that's St Christopher, who is looking after us on our various journeys. And then we've got this lovely old AA badge here, the Automobile Association. And there is also, for good measure, an RAC, a Royal Automobile Club badge as well. So
original number plate?
It is the original number plate, yes.
It's just total eccentric, isn't it? It's amazing. I mean, it must be a showstopper wherever you take her.
Yeah, it's really it really draws people in, and we have some wonderful conversations. So many people, had a Morris Minor themselves or have stories about them, and
so many people with mixed marriages.
Yes, I think that's very.
Well, I've been hand chosen to interview you, I think. How would you go about telling me about what we see through the square windows and the rectangular windows? How would we start now?
Yeah, so probably let's start around this side. So we've got here a little bit of information about the life of Marconi himself. So who was he? Where was he born? How did he get into radio? There's a little bit of information about what radio waves actually are and the electromagnetic spectrum. In particular, there's some information about Marconi's early experiments, so he was a real pioneer in that respect. He started as a little boy with the help of his mother in the attic.
She very much supported him. She believed in her boy, wasn't she?
She certainly did, yeah.
She had really the proud mother syndrome.
Well, yeah, you could call it that, yeah. And I think his brother was also very, he was enlisted to help with the experiment. So it was definitely a family...
Did it ring the bell, Francois?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we got a little bit about what a radio is, and then a set of some interesting bits of
Point me in the right direction.
Yeah, so there's a Marconi company timer here, which is actually a mechanical device. I suspect that is probably from the later period of, I think this probably came from a television studio. That's a rather nice little bit of equipment. We've got a drinks mat here from the Marconi Marine Company, just drawing people's attention to the fact that there was a time, you know, when you were making a sea voyage, where you might excitedly go over to the radio officer and
ask her, are we thinking?
That, but also, you know, you could send messages back home. And then we've got a little bit about my own research. So I work on these magnetic waves called spin waves, which are potentially quite interesting as a platform for new kinds of information processing.
Are they miniature candles? What are they?
So this is supposed to illustrate a spin wave is these are like little magnets, so that move into the shape of a wave. So a spin wave is a fast magnetic wave that can propagate through certain types of magnetic material, and they're just like electromagnetic waves, except that they're purely magnetic, and they have interesting applications in information processing.
It's all Greek to me. Okay, carry on.
So, and actually, so this is relevant to Marconi's work because the frequency of these waves is similar to the frequencies that range that radar and mobile communications work at these days, which of course were both ideas so Marconi was was a very early pioneer of radio communication.
Alexi, could you tell me what this particular, what do you call it, sign, notice, sticker? The Marconi van is a collaboration between, now there's lots of serious names there. Could you just tell us, starting at the top, what they all are?
Yeah, so the Institute for Digital Archaeology is a not-for-profit organisation that works at the interface between science and cultural heritage. And this exhibition is a collaboration between the IDA, the Institute for Digital Archaeology, and the History of Science Museum in Oxford on Broad Street, which has a really important collection of Marconi artefacts. My own home department in Oxford, which is the Department of Physics. My Oxford College, Magdalen College, and also an initiative in Santa Marinella, which is run by my very good friend Professor Livio Spinelli, who is very much dedicated to the life and legacy, or supporting the initiatives around the life and legacy of Marconi in Italy. So on the other side we've got a sort of continuation of the exhibition here. So there's an old telegraph key here, and a little sign here to remind people of their Morse code if they're a bit rusty, because of course the first wireless messages were sent using the same kind of telegraph key technology that we use, that was used previously for the wired telegraph system. There's a little bit of information here about spark gap transmitters, which of course were so important for early radio systems. So all of the early radio systems use these spark gap transmitters that basically generate a huge electrical discharge across a gap. This is a sort of brute force approach, I suppose, to transmitting radio waves. They're very noisy. You could hear the discharge from the big spark gap masts many miles away from the masts themselves, and they're also not that efficient. So this is a technology that was quite quickly replaced by tuned transmitters as the technology developed. We've also got an early quartz crystal oscillator. So tuned radio systems were, I suppose, the important kind of next step in the development of radio systems after the proof of concept. And of course the So Marconi's Nobel Prize in 1909 was actually shared with Braun, and Braun was a physicist who made some really important contributions to the development of those tuned systems. So this is, in the glass tube there, a piece of quartz crystal. It's a piezoelectric material, so if you put an electrical potential difference across a piece of quartz, so a voltage, it actually it produces a strain in the material, so it changes mechanically and vice versa, and you can build a really nice tuned system using a piece of quartz, using the fact that the frequency that a piece of quartz wants to vibrate at depends on the thickness of that piece of material, and in the tube there is an early piece of the center of an early quartz crystal oscillator, which is a piece of quartz of a particular thickness that will vibrate when you excite it electrically at a particular frequency. That's actually I think a 1940s piece of technology there. So we've also got a little bit of information about these systems called coherers. So we've talked about early transmitters. The coherer was an important part of early radio receivers. So a coherer is basically a glass tube that has two electrodes in it that are separated by a little gap, and in the gap there are little pieces of metal. And when you apply a radio signal to that system, almost magically the little pieces of metal kind of line up, they stick to one another across the gap, and they complete the circuit. And this is a really simple and quite effective way of detecting a radio signal, and this was the technology that was used in those very early receivers. And you can see, if you look on the History of Science Museum website, the Oxford History of Science Museum website, some pictures of these actual devices that were made by Marconi and his contemporaries at the turn of the 20th century. So then over here we've got a postcard from 1940 sent to an address in Rome by the Marconisti. So this was essentially a radio postcard, so somebody would have dictated their message to whoever they wanted to send it to, and then it was transcribed at the other end and sent on to the recipient. It's a nice little piece of history. And then behind it we have some vacuum tubes, some valves. So valves, before the invention and ubiquity of the transistor, the valve was crucial to any kind of electrical system that required some gain. So a system where you wanted to increase the size of a signal. You start off with a little signal and you want a big signal at the other end, and obviously radio systems are a really important example of that kind of system. So there's a selection of valves here dating from different periods, different sizes, different constructions, but one of the important outputs, if you like, of the Marconi company. Has a very, very cute little
original engine. It's not like these granddad's broom where the handle, Rodney's, the handle and the brush have been interchanged and he's had it for 50 years. What's original? I see that looks original.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect it, so it's basically all original. I mean, there's nothing, it hasn't had a lead-free conversion, so the head is all original. The carburettor, as you can see, is all nice and original. I have to say that I am not an absolute sort of moggy
the geeks will spot
here.
Something that
so
shouldn't
I'm absolutely sure that there are one or two things here that don't date, you know, from 68 when it was built. I'm sure bits have been sort of upgraded, but as you can see, there's nothing really modern here. It's basically all pretty authentic.
Not a drop of rust.
It's not too bad.
They don't build them like this. And yet the DeLorean just didn't really take off,
Yeah,
did it? Wonderful.
No.
Lovely, lovely. And how many miles did you say it done?
It's done 50, just over 15,000.
5 careful owners?
It's had 4 careful owners actually.
And you, or was that?
No, that includes me. Yeah.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. I'll just video you putting it down. Can you manage it? I like that slam at the end.
I actually like the fact that the bonnet stays up by itself. I mean, actually, the reality is that because of the design of it, it really has to, because otherwise it would be quite dangerous. But it is beautifully designed. It's really, really, really nice.
Bye.
Bye.